Today in Agronomy on KFIL AM 1060 with Pioneer Field Agronomist Allie Wise and Josh Schaffner. Here's Josh and Allie.
Good morning, Southeast Minnesota. It's November 17th, 2021, and this is episode 85. So kind of in a bit of a transition phase here as we kind of talked a little bit on the last episode. Harvest wrapping up pretty early here in Southeast Minnesota. It seems like a lot of growers are really kind of jumping on the combines and really doing a lot of prep work for 2022 right out of the gate. And for many reasons, some of that is just obviously prices of inputs are a little bit volatile. I think a lot of growers are looking at, we need to kind of get this locked up just, for two reasons. Number one, we need to get it locked up. Got to make sure we got supply. And number two, I think also just trying to, get our heads wrapped around some input costs and kind of what is it going to take to produce the 2022 crop in general, just so we can make some decisions on marketing and get a good grasp of where we're at here. So, maybe happening a little quicker than usual, but I also think it's a really good thing that everyone's kind of taking a hard look at this and, kind of getting ready for that. So I think in this episode, I'll kind of do the same thing. I think we won't spend a lot of time on looking back, and we'll kind of look forward here a little bit. And the first segment we'll cover some of the crop nutrition, fertilizer side of things. That's probably one of the hot topics across the area right now. And then in the second segment, I'm going to dive into a little bit about Enlist E3 Soybeans. Obviously, a lot of interest in that, a lot of uptake, growth in that market. And I'll spend a little bit of time on that here as well in the second segment. So I think we'll jump right in here from a fertilizer standpoint. Obviously a lot of fall fertilizer has been going down. A lot is still going down. I think some of you probably are still working on some final plans for kind of what we're going to do from a phosphorus, potassium standpoint here for next year's crop. And I kind of just want to cover maybe just, maybe some philosophies or some approaches that we could utilize to take a look at our P&K applications. And I think first things first is obviously, the costs are up quite a bit on P&K. We're probably looking at, close to I'm not saying a full doubling, but a huge 75, 80, 90% increase, potentially just depending on pricing and timing of purchase of what that's going to be. So, how much should we be applying? How should we be approaching this? Should we do some samples to see what's going on? And, we'll kind of review this a little bit. So first things first, we got, it's still, granted it's November, we're getting cold, but, if there is some opportunity to do some sampling, if you got some farms that you just don't have current samples on, I still think I'd maybe try to see if there's some days here that we could get fresh samples on it. I think it just help us make some decisions if we haven't done any applications yet. So take advantage of, we still have some time. If we can get some samples, if the weather cooperates, we can still, get fresh samples, get results back, and also do some applications yet this fall before things freeze up and the snow flies here. So that could be something to look at. So, but really what I want to spend more time on is, kind of what approach should we take? Okay. If you look at this market, we're really not in a great financial market to do some major building, right? P&K is expensive. We're going to go out there and do some building programs. Some farms may need it and we may get forced to spread a little extra. But in most cases, we're probably going to be looking at, what does the next crop need is one approach, or what did we take from the last crop, which is usually the approach I personally prefer. That's just a preference. I always like to say, I'd rather look back and what did I take from my farm with my yields, and I just want to put that back so that I continue to have the same opportunity that I had with this crop or the previous crop, just so that we're not having a negative balance year over year of how much we're removing from the soil. So that's just a couple approaches. In this market, I'm probably going to more look at what did I take. So what do I mean by that? So for example, let's just say my corn yielded 200 bushel. How much phosphorus, how much potassium did I take? You can look these numbers up. The numbers I'm using here, you can see some variations in it. But on average, a bushel of corn is going to take up 0.37 pounds of P2O5 phosphorus and 0.3 pounds of K2O or the potassium side of things. So now, again, that's an actual, so you'd have to do some, math back to figure out how much DAP or MAP or how much potash is that. But that's just simple of what a corn crop took. On the flip side, soybeans is kind of the opposite. So corn is a larger phosphorus user than potassium. Soybeans is the opposite. They're a larger potassium user than phosphorus. So, for example, soybeans are going to utilize 0.8 pounds of P2O5 phosphorus per bushel. Soybeans are going to use around 1.5 pounds of K2O per bushel. So just running simple math there. So in most cases, if you're coming out of beans, you're probably going to be spreading more potash and phosphorus if you're just going to put back what you took. If you're replacing what you took on corn, you're going to be spreading more phosphorus and potassium. Now on the corn side of it, if you're spreading coming out of corn, you also got to remember, or if you're going to be planting corn, just remember to use all your credits. If you're using some starter that's got phosphorus, make sure you're accounting for that in your application calculations as well. In some cases, you might be getting a few. You may be using a little bit of starter that's got some very low levels of potassium. In the liquid world, we usually can't get much potassium out of that. But in most cases this year, I'm encouraging guys, go back. It's like, look, I know it's expensive. These are some tough checks to write, but in most cases, let's just put back what we took. Now, we can also utilize some technology in this. There are some software packages. We do this with our granular platform here at Pioneer, that you can take your yield map and actually do a variable rate and say, hey, that part of the farm yielded more than this one. Let's just put back what we took. And that's also something maybe you can reach out to your fertilizer or your precision ag person to do something like that as well. Okay, as we come back from break, I'll get into E3 soybeans. Welcome back, listeners. So first segment there, we had just covered a few things around the crop nutrition thing. And obviously, if you have questions on that, don't be shy to reach out to your local Pioneer sales rep or myself. If we need to go through anything like that in more detail, we would gladly spend some time with you and make sure we got that dialed in. So I mentioned in the second segment, I was going to get into the Enlist soybean E3 system. You just have had a lot of questions and interest from growers across southeast Minnesota, especially as we've launched a lot of new varieties in this, market, especially from Pioneer, and a lot of data on these varieties, and obviously just the weed control system, simplicity and ease of use. I just had a lot of questions around that. But so a couple things I do want to cover just around this. I still get a lot of questions. I know we've covered it. Alan and I have talked about this, but I still do get a lot of questions from producers and just kind of comparing that Enlist system versus the Roundup Ready 2 Extend system. So first things first, I still get a question of, what herbicides is Enlist E3 soybeans tolerant to? And there's three of them. Number one, they're tolerant to glyphosate. Number two, they're tolerant to Enlist 2,4-D or 2,4-D choline. And then the third one is they are resistant to glufosinate, or we usually refer to it as Liberty. So those are the three herbicides that Enlist E3 soybeans are tolerant to. So when you think about southeast Minnesota, we have some counties such as Fillmore and Winona and Olmsted County that fall in that invasive species category, which makes applications of dicamba in Roundup Ready 2 Extend soybeans much more challenging. We have additional buffers. We have some other restrictions that are really challenging. And I just want to kind of maybe just compare a few of those things just so we have a good understanding of, how does the Enlist system fit into a situation like that? Or are there additional restrictions or similar restrictions? And in most cases, there's not. It's a much easier herbicide platform to apply and flexibility and just a really great system that way. So, just kind of going through a few things. If you do get your local Pioneer agronomy summary book from your local sales rep, there's some great information. I'm actually referring to that here in this segment here as I go through this today. So, one thing I get questions on, is there a date cutoff on Enlist E3 soybeans? And the answer is there's not. So Enlist E3 soybeans is a growth stage cutoff. So in this case, we can spray Enlist soybeans through R2, so basically up to R3 soybeans. So there's no date. So in some cases, hey, maybe you put beans after peas or something like that. You can spray Enlist on those soybeans all the way until they're R3, whether that's in middle July, late July, whenever that comes out to be. So no restrictions that way, which is one of the biggest upsides to the Enlist system, is not having a calendar date cutoff from that standpoint. There's also not a time of day limitation, so there's nothing that says, hey, you got to wait, 1 hour after sunrise or 2 hours for sunset. Nothing like that. You can, no limitations, just more, making sure we got the, this the right conditions. We're not super dewy. We're not raining, things like that is all we got to worry about. The other thing is we can apply Enlist to soybeans up to 3 times, with one of them being a pre or a burn down. In most cases, we don't recommend spraying it ever 3 times or even 2 times. We still encourage using a good residual. Coming back post with a layered residual as well with the Enlist is probably going to be kind of the Cadillac version to make sure we got clean fields all the way through. So that's kind of a nice thing there as well. The other thing I get questions on, are there any other adjuvants required with Enlist, such as a buffering agent? The answer to that is no. There is no buffering agent needed. And Enlist does have near zero volatility. So basically what we're saying there is once Enlist hits the ground or a plant, that's where it stays. When you leave the field, we're not going to have risk of that, volatilizing, coming up into the atmosphere and kind of moving well after you leave the farm. That's just not going to be something that we have to worry about with the Enlist system compared to the Roundup Ready 2 Extend system. So that's kind of a really nice thing there too. And then as you look at a few of the other benefits, I think this is just really big too, is you can use dry ammonium sulfate with Enlist. And why is that important? That opens the door that we can tank mix with Liberty. In the Dicamba system, in Roundup Ready 2 Extend Flex, you can spray Liberty into soybeans, but you can't spray Liberty tank mixed with Dicamba. It would be separate trips if you were going to utilize both technologies. Or in the Enlist system, we can utilize them, as a tank mix partner if needed. And if we ever get to a situation where we get some weeds that get maybe just a little bit bigger or just going to be a little more tougher or challenging, that's where we're going to look at potentially utilizing that tank mix partner from that standpoint, which is a really great benefit to have that as well. I think the other thing too, we just got to be thinking about, we've been hearing also a lot of things about what's the availability of glyphosate. I think that one's going to be a little less challenging than the availability of Liberty. It sounds like just the supply chain of Liberty is going to be a challenge. And if you do think about, regulations of the Roundup Ready 2 Extend or Extend Flex system, not being able, if in the event we need to fall back and utilize Liberty, is it going to be there? What's the cost of Liberty going to be there? The one thing nice about the Enlist herbicide, we have great availability across the marketplace. It's all manufactured here in the United States. So we have good control, good supply of that, where we know that's going to be here and probably not going to be a challenge from that. So a lot of great things there. If you got questions on Enlist E3 soybeans, be sure to reach out to your local Pioneer sales rep or myself, and we'll get you all the info you need. We'll see you next week.
You've been listening to Today in Agronomy on KFIL AM 1060. If you've missed part of the show or want to hear more, check out the show page at kfilradio.com or with the 103.1 KFIL app. Stay connected with Allie and Josh on Twitter. It's at AllieGWise, WISE, and at Josh Schaffner to submit your questions for the show. Tune in next Wednesday for the next Today in Agronomy on KFIL AM 1060. We'll see you at 11 a.m.